Hey guys, in this video, you'll learn how to fine-tune your hardware settings in Xmr-stak. We'll check the CPU and GPU config files and learn new features that were brought to you by the developers. If you have AMD GPUs in your system, for tweaking, you need to open the AMD config file that was generated after the first start of the miner. Some GPUs and algorithms can be mined faster if they work in so-called two-thread mode. To do that, repeat your config entries for each GPU and use twice each config parameter called index. This parameter maps settings to a selected GPU in your system and usually starts from 0. Notice that the required memory usage on the GPU will also double. Therefore, adjust your intensity parameter by hand. Intensity and work size are the most commonly altered config parameters for AMD cards. Both represent number of small parallel compute processes inside each GPU config thread. In most cases, intensity must be an equal multiplier of work size. When set to two-threaded mode, another new parameter can be helpful: interleaving. The interleave config parameter controls when a worker thread is starting to calculate hashes if two threads are used to utilize each GPU. You can consider it as a sort of delay between calculation cycles on each GPU thread. This parameter is designed to reduce total idle periods of the GPU while mining. Again, notice that interleave adjusting makes sense and displays in log only when the GPU is ran in two-threaded mode. In general, interleaving messages in the log can be helpful when checking how two-threading works with your GPU at the current set of settings, including the GPU overclock, miner settings, and drivers. The default interleave value of 40 works good in most cases. Now let's understand the miner interleave messages and think if we need to adjust it. If you have the last delay value reduced when you started the miner over time to minimum possible value and stays at it, it means that your two-thread config is well synced. Also, it's a good sign if interleave messages appear rarely over time. The reported hash rate will be close to maximum of GPU capabilities. And if delay value jumps over time multiple times and grows continuously, this means that the GPU threads are not performing well, and you need to make some adjustments. We'll not cover all possible scenarios in this video. You'll be able to find them on the Xmr-stak forum. But if your threads are not syncing well, we would recommend reducing the intensity values and adjusting the interleave parameter by several points. Another new feature in Xmr-stak is auto-tune. It may help you to speed up the seek process of finding optimal intensity for your GPU if you prefer not using auto-generated intensity values. When set, the miner will perform several rounds per each intensity check of given range. When setting the number of rounds, keep in mind that you want to have a balance of speed and reliability of the checking. After setting the number of checks per intensity value, you'll need to set the ceiling value after which the miner will stop checking intensity values. During checking, the miner will report each GPU thread and currently checked and last checked intensity values. After the checking, you will see locked intensity values. Write them down. Then, disable auto-tuning by setting this parameter back to 0 and fill in the intensity values found by the miner in the config file. Keep in mind that this feature is experimental and works only for AMD GPUs. If you have NVIDIA GPUs in your system, for tweaking, you need to open the NVIDIA config file that was generated after the first start of the miner. The NVIDIA config parameters differ from the AMD config parameters, and here, if you want to alter settings, more than likely you'll change threads, blocks, and B-factor parameters. In short, all these three parameters define how many small compute threads the GPU will run. You can, for example, reduce these numbers and see the effect in reduced hash rate on your own. If you run your miner on GUI systems like Windows with NVIDIA, you can probably notice some lagging or freezes after you start your miner. To reduce this lag, increase B-factor and B-sleep parameters. Don't be afraid to experiment if you want to with these settings, and if you find better parameter combinations compared with the stock config file, share your results on the Xmr-stak forum. The CPU config parameters are stored in the CPU config file that was generated after the first start of the miner. While, in most cases, the miner generates the most optimal config file, you may wish to change some of the settings, and there are basically two major steps that you will have to perform. The first one is find out the amount of cache memory and physical cores in your CPU. You can do that by looking online at your CPU model. Notice not only the amount of cache in your CPU, but also the amount per physical CPU core. The second important value is, let's call it memory requirement, which is also called the scratch pad of the algorithm that you're mining. This value is usually measured in kilobytes or megabytes. Then, divide the cache size of the CPU by the scratch pad size and compare it with the physical core count. If you multiply the scratch pad size by the number of compute threads, you will get a memory amount that will be allocated when mining the selected algorithm. In our example, we can see that our algorithm has a 256 kilobyte scratch pad. The CPU has 3 cores and 512 kilobytes of cache per core. So, it will be optimal to use 3 threads with doubled scratch pad size on each thread. Each line represents 1 mining thread that is run in the miner. To set the doubled scratch pad size, set low power mode parameter to 2. When you've determined how many mining threads you wish to run, assign these threads to physical cores on your CPU, editing the corresponding parameter. Don't be afraid to experiment, if you want to, with these settings. Reducing the number of mining threads can make your PC more responsive while continuing to mine at the same time. We covered the basics of hardware tuning in Xmr-stak. There are a lot of nuances with overclocking, driver versions, operating systems, and much more. Join our forum to check new guides, share your configs, or report problems. Thanks for watching.